Welcome back. That was a great interview with Carlo and Tony. And Tony is joining me again in the studio because we have a special guest on the phone, Christine Quinn. She's a former New York City Council speaker and a storied New York City politician. Tony, why don't you tell us a little bit more about Chris?
Sure. Chris, welcome on the show.
Thank you very much.
Lovely to have you. Chris and I go way back. Chris is a longtime New Yorker, housing advocate, former speaker of the city council. She ran for mayor, and now she is heading a great organization by the name of WIN, Women and Children in Need, helping and serving New York City's homeless population. I'm going to just hand it over to Chris because Chris can probably articulate much better than I can the amazing work she's doing for New Yorkers today.
Well, thank you very much, and thank both of you. And at WIN, we are the largest provider of shelter and permanent supportive housing to homeless families in New York City. We have 11 shelters across the city and also have about 250 units of supportive housing. That's permanent housing, but with social services that sometimes folks need. And we are also in the process of building 3 new buildings that will also be permanent supportive housing. And one of the things that I think most New Yorkers don't realize is that 80% of the people in shelter in New York City, 80% are families. Now, I in no way, shape, or form want to say that the single individuals that you see on the street a lot don't need help. They do. But almost all of the debate right now and focus has been around the issue of singles. And we need to also make sure that our response as a city to homelessness includes families, because that is the reality of the majority of whom homeless people are. And inherent in that reality is the need for targeted services that are helping children. Being homeless is a trauma to an adult, but think about the trauma it is to a child. And if you don't have the kind of support we do at WIN in every family shelter, we're going to be failing children. Right. We have childcare at every facility. We have after-school programs. We have special after-school programs for middle school children based on a STEM curriculum. We have a Camp WIN, that we run all summer and every school break for children, just as some examples. And that camp during school break is really particularly important because I also think this is a statistic many of your listeners won't know, that a very significant portion of the single mothers in shelter are working. 43% of the single women in shelter in New York City, single women in WIN shelters, 43% of the women in WIN shelters of our mothers are working. Right. If we didn't have Camp WIN last week during school break, those moms might have had to miss work. The last thing you want a homeless woman to have to do. So really, we're not having a full discussion or debate, and when that happens, we're not really doing the right policy or programming.
I agree. I don't think you're getting the word out, or, the powers that be aren't, not you.
Right.
And I'm glad that you're on the show because it's all a matter of perception. So if we see a single person on the street or on the subway, that's our analysis of the homeless situation.
And absolutely. And much of the debate led by some folks in the media has been very kind of villain-focused, right? These very unflattering, unattractive pictures of folks probably with very severe mental illness on the street and single individuals. And I believe those pictures are designed to create an us-them attitude. Right. To pit non-homeless people against homeless people, not to bring the city together. And look, I want every New Yorker to feel and care and empathize with that person on the street. But if you can't, boy, you're a hard-hearted person if you're not compelled by the reality of the fact that 20% of the people in shelter in New York City are 5 years of age or younger. Right. And the reality of families is it's the truth of the majority, but it's also a reality that can unite us as a city to begin to break the cycle of homelessness, particularly for homeless children who are really the forgotten face of homelessness.
Is there a balance in your budget between private and public sector?
Well, yeah, an off balance. We're about a $70 million organization. About $65 million comes from government, the rest from private. And we would love all the more private donations we could get, and that's one of my goals here at WIN. But there will always be more government funding because, you know, as most folks know, the city of New York is, I think, the only city, certainly one of the only cities, but I think the only city in the country that has a legal requirement based on a court case ruling to provide shelter. So we are, in providing shelters to homeless families, helping the city meet their statutory legal requirement. But that said, I want that legal requirement and the funding we therefore get from the city to not be the ceiling of the services we provide, but to kind of be the floor and to really expand the public-private partnership that we put in place, because what we believe at WIN is that the way to break the cycle of homelessness is through comprehensive, holistic services. You know, people often end up homeless for a number of reasons. Yes, there are some for whom it is largely or exclusively an economic issue. And for those folks, we need to help them get a voucher so they have enough money to pay their rent. We need to work with them on job training and income building to get better jobs or to go from part-time to full-time, off the books, on the books. But for others, there's just issues of domestic violence.
Chris, I have a question. How, if somebody's without out their home or newly homeless and they're a parent, how do they find out about your organization?
So they go, if you're a homeless family, you go to the city's intake center, which is actually in the Bronx, and then you get assigned to a shelter. So we provide, you know, you have a 1 in 10 chance, because we house 10% of all of the homeless families in the city. There's a 1 in 10 chance you're going to end up at WIN, but you do end up where the city sends you out of the intake shelter.
How do we get other New Yorkers to help? You had said before there's an imbalance in the private sector, but what's WIN's website? Where can New Yorkers go to donate, to volunteer? Because obviously, like you said, this is a New York problem that has to be solved by all New Yorkers. So we don't vilify them, and we actually realize they're fellow New Yorkers that we want to house.
Well, I think it's a great question, and I think the first answer to that is really to recognize a lot of these folks are working. What I emphasize that because what that means is that any of us could probably end up in this situation, because we all know, maybe not right now in our lives, but at different points in our lives, we've lived paycheck to paycheck. And where does that put any of us? One tragedy away from not being able to pay our rent. So people need to recognize the similarities. Then, two, I would ask folks to go to WIN's website, to go to another homeless provider's website. It doesn't have to be WIN, and make a contribution. Whatever you can do will help. Trust me. You know what I mean? $100. We're having a fundraiser. We just had a fundraiser recently around supporting our camp that we do for children. Mm-hmm. You know, $100 will cover almost all of the costs for a day of camp for a homeless child. Now, many New Yorkers are spending $100, on dinner out, if not more. You can make an enormous difference by going online, making that donation, or volunteering. You know, we have social services in our shelter all day long, but we don't have it at night, and we don't necessarily have it on weekends. So if you want to donate your time, or where you work has a volunteer program, that's enormously helpful to us.
We definitely want to encourage New Yorkers to support our fellow New Yorkers and WIN and the great job you're doing. We're going to wrap it up now. We'd love to have you on again.
Yeah, please come in and visit us.
And
we'll put this out on Twitter and on social media, and
Great.
I'll get the word out for you. Yeah. Thanks so much for joining us, Chris.
Thank you very
Chris.
much. Take
Thanks
care,
for the
guys.
great work you're doing.